Whoa, so this is a chief right here from Suriname. Peep out his necklace he got on. Now those necklaces are classified as Aboriginal breastplate. And from the National Museum of Australia, they tell us for indigenous people today, breastplates have a mixed meaning. While they are rare evidence of named individual links to places across Australia, they also are linked to the dispossession of their land. And in this article from the Oceanic Art Society, these plates were most commonly king and queen plates, and they were gifted to Aboriginal people in an attempt to establish relations sometimes resembling business negotiations. While their meaning was not universal or constant, the interpretation of their purpose was not necessarily shared among Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people, or within the members of those categories. So these was considered king and queen plates, and they were found among indigenous people all over the globe prior to the World Wars. Another chief from Australia. This picture was documented as a Aboriginal king rocking his breastplate, and peep his walking stick. You'll notice it's the same type of walking stick they had in the ancient hieroglyphics, like literally the same style of walking stick. Another group of chiefs from Suriname rocking the breastplates, and also notice that in the caption that it says Indian and Bush Negroes, but it's written in Dutch. Remember Dutch. And remember, prior to the World Wars, this was a global thing. You could find people rocking these Aboriginal breastplates. Now, when I got to looking for the Native Americans rocking the breastplates, it actually proved Dr. Gonzalez's point, and I'm going to show you why. Now, this picture from the late 1800s, if you notice the plate that he got on, it got a cross on there. And he also got another plate that's tucked underneath his left arm, and that one got a cross too. Now, this picture is from 1865. This is right after the World War. And if you look in the middle, you'll notice that that's the only part where the picture has some damage on there, right? Now, check. When we zoom in to where that damage is at, you'll notice that he rocking a cross too. Now, this was the picture that confirmed it for me. Now, notice he rocking a big old cross and they got 3 crescent moons on there, right? Now, this picture alone shows that they ain't connected to the first peoples of America. If anything, they connect them to these people. It connects them to these people. Notice the flag, right? Got 3 crescent moons. This is the old regime. Now, also keeping in mind that there was a transformation of the Ottoman Empire from the 1550s all the way to the 1700s. It was a change of power, so to say. And also keeping in mind that Christians had a protected status within the Ottoman Empire and enjoyed security and peace at least up to the 18th century. The Ottomans employed Christians and incorporated them into the Ottoman elite, which consisted of families with diverse ethno-religious backgrounds. And to push that line even further, this is a Lapayan chief, his daughter, and an unidentified Seminole woman. You can find this in the New York Public Library, also on texasranger.org. Now, what I want you to peep out is the necklace that he rocking. Notice how they got a star and a crescent, right? But that star and crescent actually connects them to the Malay people. So much so that a lot of their titles and words actually translate from the Malay language. So like Lapayan, right, that actually translates from Malay all the way to English into centipede. So if you know anything about the scorpion and centipede and those type of people, tied together. And in past videos, we learned that a lot of these titles are actually exonyms for other names. So like Pueblos, right? Pueblos actually call themselves the Kawak, and their language Laguna is a Western Karasan language. And when you translate Karasan from the Malay language to English, you get the word hard. So it's a hard language. And when we look into the Penwetton hypothesis, they tell us that the Penwetton language family is the largest genealogical linguistic grouping in Western North America. And when we translate the word Penwetton from the Malay language, you get the word purification. Now, whole time, while they call themselves purifying, they really diluting and erasing your language and culture. Because keep in mind, whole time they calling these people unidentified Seminoles, notice they all got afros. Book reference. When we look into the missionaries of the Danish company, and they made subjects out of the inhabitants who were Moors and Indians, the Danish missionaries also employed themselves in preaching to the natives in the Malabar tongue, the Malay, which they are perfect masters of. Now remember, when we talking Malay, we talking Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, etc. Now when you understand who and what these people are connected to, like this high school in Taiwan that put on a certain type of theme Christmas parade, it really starts to bring more clarity into actually who's who and who has what type of ancestral type of connection. Because although there is a lot of diversity, they're all interconnected. So when you even look into like language, culture, even phenotype, you'll notice that like these Athabascans and these Malays, it's a connection. Even when we look into these other different groups who claim to be exclusive from other groups, you'll come to realize that they're all single cultural groups and they just had different points in history where they dispersed and separated. Which is why during the World Wars, you'll see these people together, Ukrainians and Native Americans on the Great Plains. It's from the Ukrainian History and Education Center. Now to push, identifying the language groups a little bit further, now these words they tell us that are indigenous American words like canoe, barbecue, avocado, etc., you'll come to realize that these words are actually Dutch words, or at least a Dutch translation of the word. So much to the extent when I put in the Spanish translation of the word barbecue and translated it to Dutch, you'll still get the English version that we know today. Now remember earlier we were talking about the so-called Indian Bush Negroes of Suriname, right? Now remember they all got on the Aboriginal breastplate. Now when you look into their language group, starting at the top, there are 6 major Bush Negro tribes in Suriname. They are still divided by the language differences, but mainly by geography. For until recently, they were isolated in different parts of the country. Despite their isolation, the tribes are able to converse in Dutch or Taki-Taki, which is mainly a blend of Dutch, English, and Latin languages. Now, also keeping in mind that some Native Americans, particularly the Cherokees of the Carolinas, also the Chickasaws, identified themselves as Black Dutch in order to avoid being sent west to the reservations. Black Dutch. Now, also keeping in mind that Tutnese, which was supposedly supposed to be an enslaved language, right? That language was also called Double Dutch. Also, another variant of Dutch, Negers Hollands, which is considered Negro Dutch, was a Dutch-based Creole language that was spoken in the Danish West Indies. Remember, we just read about the Danish mercenaries, but Danish West Indies, which is now known as the U.S. Virgin Islands. And when we look into J.L. Dillard, an advocate for Native Black American language, pondered on the possibility of Negro Dutch survivals among Native Black Americans before ultimately concluding that Dutch Creole is the least likely of all Creoles to be significantly represented in surviving Black dialects within the continental United States, but its historical role is not necessarily so insignificant. Now, when we look where Dutch originated from, they tell you the Netherlands, and the Netherlands was often called Holland, which I find interesting because New York was once called New Netherland, and Australia was once called New Holland. Now, if you look into what the term Black Dutch means, it supposedly means Germans with swarthy or darker complexions was called Black Dutch. Which leads to another interesting point, right? When you look into Africans from the German Imperial Army, right? Peep out the uniform, peep out his helmet, right? You'll notice that those same helmets are worn by buffalo soldiers. Like, it's literally the same helmet. And I mean literally the same helmet. And if you know anything about this fort, that fort has connections to the Apache Wars, the Civil War, World War II, and the Korean Wars. Now, mind you, this is a deep history that we was all fed lies about. It's a very deep history. To the extent when you look into the 33rd United States Colored Troops of the Civil War, right? I want you to peep out his helmet. If you look underneath those numbers, it almost like a horn or an instrument, right? You'll see that horn right on top, right there, right below them letters. Now, that horn is what they call a French horn. Now, why would the French horn be on the colored troops of the Civil War? Because, again, we was all fed lies about this information. Now, I'm going to close out on this. I recently posted a video not too long ago that spoke about the history of our elders who ate red clay. And I seen a lot of people that was very dismissive in the comments. They wasn't going for it. But before you be dismissive, let me educate you on something. And I ain't even going to get into the holistic health properties of it because I could talk about that all day long. But I'm going to come out of this book, which was written by Joel Cook, who was a congressman in the early 1900s. The railway route is bordered by an apparently almost impenetrable jungle, and the few settlements are widely separated and the population sparse, seeming to be chiefly Negroes dressed in ancient-looking clothing ornamented with patches. The few whites who appear are bellish and yellowish, and their complexions and garb being alike of the butternut hue, while both races seem to talk the same dialect. Thus, moving further southward, the Carolina Tar Heels are replaced by the Crackers and the Butternuts. Now, this is for educational purposes only, but they got replaced by who? Like they said, replaced, looking as if they had been rolled in a generation in the clayey soils drained by the Ediso and Chattahoochee and Savannah rivers and their neighboring streams, who further inward are the clay eaters of Georgia. And from the Journal of Royal Society of Medicine, now they talking about in South America, this area is populated by the Ottomacs, a forgotten tribe, which shows the most peculiar behavior. The Ottomacs eat earth. That is, they wolf it down in a quite considerable amount. And it is noteworthy that the members of the Ottomac tribe were selected preferring a brand of fine red clay that seems similar to that consumed in South Africa. Now, the Ottomacs are said to be an extinct Aboriginal people from Venezuela. And notice in the Library of Congress, when we look into the Potomacs, notice how that P is replaceable. If you take that P away, you get Ottomac. And the Potomacs connect to Pocahontas and Powhatan. And through that connection, we are all interconnected through. Black History Museum,